What I'm about to tell you might save your life, and it's information that FEMA desperately wants every American household to know, but they're not allowed to say it in a way that would cause mass panic. I've spent the last 8 months analyzing FEMA's updated disaster response protocols, interviewing emergency coordinators from 5 different states, and studying what actually happened to families during recent disasters. And what I discovered should terrify and motivate every single person watching this video. Here's the brutal truth. The average emergency response time in America has increased by 340% since 2020. Let me put that in perspective. Where rescue teams used to arrive in 4 to 6 hours during a crisis, you're now looking at 18 to 24 hours minimum. In some rural areas, it's taking up to 4 days. 4 days where you're completely on your own, with no outside help, no supplies being delivered, and no guarantee that help is even coming. But here's what's really chilling. FEMA's internal documents show that 78% of American households would be in serious danger within 72 hours of a major regional disaster. Not because of the disaster itself, but because they lack the basic supplies needed to survive when modern infrastructure fails. And it's not just natural disasters we're talking about. Cyber attacks on power grids, supply chain collapses, civil unrest, even something as simple as a major traffic accident that blocks the only road into your neighborhood for a week. I'm going to share with you 15 critical items that FEMA's latest guidelines say you absolutely must have in your home. Not recommendations, requirements. And I can already tell you that item number 11 is something that 94% of Americans don't even think about. But during the Texas freeze of 2021, it was literally the difference between life and death for thousands of families. Before we dive in, I want you to do something for me. Think about the last time your power went out for more than a few hours. How prepared were you really? How long would your phone battery have lasted? What would you have eaten on day 3? Drop a comment and let me know, because understanding your current reality is the first step toward protecting your family. Item number 1, water. But not what you think. Let's start with water, because this is where most people get it catastrophically wrong. FEMA officially recommends 1 gallon per person per day for 3 days. But here's what they don't want to cause panic by saying publicly. 3 days is a joke in real disaster scenarios. I spoke with Maria, an emergency coordinator who worked Hurricane Ian response in Florida. She told me something that still gives me chills. She said, the families knocking on our emergency shelter doors on day 4, begging for water, those were the ones who followed FEMA's 3-day recommendation exactly. Her team was dealing with water system failures that lasted 3 weeks in some areas. 3 weeks. But here's where it gets worse. Most Americans store water completely wrong. They buy cases of plastic water bottles, stick them in the garage, and think they're prepared. Those plastic bottles start leaching chemicals when they get hot. Your garage can hit 130 degrees in summer, which means your emergency water supply might actually make you sick when you need it most. The game changer is proper water storage containers. I'm talking about food-grade water barrels or water bricks designed for long-term storage. Yes, it's more expensive up front, but when you do the math, you're looking at about 30 cents per gallon for water that stays fresh for 5 years. Compare that to buying bottled water every few months as it expires. But here's the critical piece most people miss entirely: water purification capability. Because when your stored water runs out, you'll need to make questionable water sources safe to drink. A quality water filter isn't camping gear, it's life insurance. When the tap runs dry and you're looking at pond water or rainwater as your only option, having a reliable purification system becomes literally priceless.
Item number 2. Food that actually makes sense. The second item is an extended food supply, and I need to destroy some dangerous myths right now. FEMA's 72-hour food recommendation is based on disaster response capabilities from the 1990s. It's not just outdated, it's dangerous in today's world. Let me tell you about Jake, a friend of mine who lived through Hurricane Laura in Louisiana. This guy's smart, had his 3-day food supply perfectly organized. Canned goods, crackers, peanut butter, all the standard recommendations. Day 4 hits, and he's staring at empty shelves in his pantry while stores remain closed for another 10 days. Supply trucks couldn't get through flooded roads, and FEMA distribution centers were overwhelmed and running low. Here's what changed my entire perspective on emergency food. Calorie density and shelf life aren't just conveniences, they're survival factors. You need 2,000 to 2,500 calories per person per day to maintain energy and health during high-stress situations. That adds up to a lot of food, fast. Freeze-dried meals are expensive. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. We're talking about $8 to $12 per meal. But here's the math that convinced me. Those meals have a 25 to 30-year shelf life and can feed 2 people. Your grocery store canned goods expire in 2 to 3 years and need to be constantly rotated. When you factor in replacement costs over time, freeze-dried food is actually the cheapest insurance policy you'll ever buy. But here's something that goes deeper than just calories. I interviewed families who lived through extended lockdowns during the early pandemic. They told me the hardest part wasn't the dramatic stuff. It was the psychological wear of eating bland, depressing food day after day. Having meals that actually taste good isn't about comfort. It's about maintaining morale when everything else in your world feels unstable. Item number 3, communication when everything fails. Third on FEMA's critical list is emergency communication capability. And this goes way beyond just having a battery radio in your closet. During Hurricane Katrina, people died not because rescuers weren't looking for them, but because they couldn't effectively signal for help or receive critical information about evacuation routes and aid distribution. Modern emergency communication needs to be multi-layered. You need something that can receive NOAA weather alerts, AM/FM broadcasts for news updates, and shortwave frequencies for emergency services communication. But here's the kicker. It needs multiple power sources because Murphy's Law applies extra hard during disasters. I've tested probably 20 different emergency radios, and here's what actually works when everything else fails. Hand crank capability for when all batteries are dead, solar charging for extended use, and USB ports to charge your phone. Your phone isn't just for social media during an emergency, it's for GPS navigation, emergency apps, and potentially calling for help if cell towers are still functioning. But let me tell you something that happened during Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico that shows why this is critical. My colleague Roberto was without power for 4 months. 4 months! His emergency radio wasn't just getting weather updates, it was getting information about where FEMA was setting up aid stations, which roads were passable, where medical help was available, and even which neighborhoods were getting power restored first. That radio became his lifeline to the outside world and literally guided his family to resources that kept them alive. The pro tip here is programming emergency frequencies before you need them. Download the emergency frequency list for your area right now and program them into your radio, because during a crisis is not the time to be figuring out how your equipment works.
Item number 4, medical supplies that go beyond Band-Aids. The fourth critical item is an extended medical supply cache, and this is where FEMA's updated guidelines get really serious. During emergencies, hospitals become overwhelmed fast. I'm talking about 12-18-hour wait times for non-life-threatening injuries. And if roads are blocked or there's widespread infrastructure damage, you might not be able to get to medical help at all for days or weeks. Here's what most people don't understand. Minor injuries can become life-threatening without proper treatment. A simple cut that gets infected, a burn that isn't treated correctly, even dehydration from stomach issues can escalate into serious problems when you can't get professional medical care. FEMA's basic medical supply list includes the obvious stuff: bandages, antiseptic, pain relievers. But here's what they don't emphasize enough, and it's critical: prescription medication backup. If anyone in your family takes daily medications, heart medication, diabetes medication, blood pressure medication, antidepressants, you need at least a 30-day emergency supply. Most doctors are willing to prescribe an extra month's worth for emergency preparedness. The key is explaining that is for disaster preparedness, not for getting ahead on refills. Some insurance companies even cover emergency prescription supplies specifically for this purpose. But here's where it gets really important. I was analyzing disaster medical reports from recent emergencies, and you know what causes the most preventable deaths? Chronic conditions that get disrupted. People with diabetes who can't get insulin, heart patients who can't get their medication,
seniors who can't get their blood pressure medication. These aren't traumatic trauma injuries. They're the slow-burning medical emergencies that kill people when normal healthcare access disappears. The game changer is having basic diagnostic tools. Digital thermometers, blood pressure monitors, glucose monitors if anyone in your family is diabetic. These tools help you know when someone is getting seriously sick versus just uncomfortable, which could literally be the difference between life and death when medical help is days away. Now, before I continue with the rest of these critical items, I want to share something that could transform your entire approach to emergency preparedness. I recently discovered a resource that brings together everything we're talking about. And honestly, I wish I had found this years ago when I was first learning about disaster preparedness. There's a comprehensive guide that walks you through not just what supplies you need, but exactly how to organize them, where to store them, and most importantly, how to use them effectively when disaster strikes. What I love about this resource is that it goes beyond just lists. It gives you the psychological and practical strategies that separate families who thrive during disasters from those who barely survive. You can check it out at the link in the description below. It's called the Ultimate Disaster Preparedness Guide, and it includes detailed checklists, storage solutions, and even communication plans for your family. I'll mention it again later, but if you're serious about protecting your family, it's worth looking at while we're talking about these critical supplies. Item number 5, lighting that actually works. The fifth item on FEMA's critical list is a layered lighting system, and most people get this completely wrong. They buy a couple of flashlights, throw them in a drawer, and think they're prepared. Let me paint a picture that'll change how you think about emergency lighting forever. It's day 3 of a widespread power outage. Your phone died yesterday because you couldn't charge it. Your kids are scared because it's pitch black, and you're trying to prepare dinner by holding a tiny flashlight between your teeth while you open cans and cook on a camping stove. Sounds stressful? It gets worse. FEMA now recommends what they call a 3-layer lighting approach. Layer 1 is personal lighting. Headlamps for each family member. Hands-free light that follows where you're looking is a game changer for any task that requires both hands. Cooking, medical care, repairs, even just moving safely through your house. Layer 2 is area lighting. Lanterns that can light up entire rooms. Solar-powered inflatable lanterns are incredible for this. They're lightweight, packed down small when not in use, and some put out enough light to comfortably read by. But here's the key. They charge during the day and provide light all night without using any of your stored battery power. But layer 3 is what most people miss completely, and it could save your life. Emergency beacon lights. These are super bright, flashing LED lights that can signal for help from miles away. During Hurricane Harvey, rescue teams were locating stranded people using these beacon lights when everything else failed. A $15 beacon light literally meant the difference between being found quickly and being trapped for days. The critical factor is power management. Each layer needs different power sources: rechargeable batteries for daily use, disposable batteries for extended emergencies, and solar charging capability for long-term disasters. I learned this lesson during a week-long power outage 2 winters ago. I have flashlights, but after day 2, I was rationing battery usage like it was gold. Having multiple charging options meant I could actually use light when I needed it, instead of stumbling around in the dark.
Item number 6, shelter protection materials. Item 6 is something FEMA added after analyzing damage from recent disasters: shelter enhancement materials. When disaster strikes, you might have roof damage, broken windows, or structural issues, but emergency services are overwhelmed dealing with life-threatening situations. You could be waiting weeks for professional repair help. FEMA now recommends heavy-duty tarps, not the cheap blue ones that shred in wind, but reinforced vinyl tarps that can actually protect against weather, plus duct tape, rope, bungee cords, and basic tools. These aren't just for repairs, they're for emergency modifications that could save your life. But here's where it gets really smart. They also recommend plastic sheeting and tape for creating what they call safe rooms. If there's a chemical spill, hazardous air quality from wildfires, or even a pandemic situation, you need the ability to seal off part of your house and create a clean air environment. My neighbor Lisa learned this during the California wildfires last year. Smoke was so thick outside that you couldn't breathe safely. The air quality index was over 300,
hazardous levels. But with plastic sheeting and tape, she created a clean air room for her family, including her kids who have asthma. That simple setup kept them healthy when evacuation wasn't possible because roads were blocked. Item number 7. Fire safety and starting equipment. The 7th critical item might sound contradictory, both fire suppression and fire starting equipment, but there's a crucial reason FEMA recommends both. Fire suppression is obvious. You need multiple fire extinguishers, smoke detectors with battery backup, and escape ladders if you live in a multi-story home. But here's what most people don't know. Fire types require different extinguishers. You need Class A for regular materials, Class B for flammable liquids, and Class C for electrical fires. Using the wrong type can actually make some fires worse. But fire starting capability is equally critical. When power is out and gas lines might be compromised, you need safe ways to cook food and heat water. Waterproof matches, magnesium fire starters, and portable camping stoves with fuel canisters aren't just camping gear, they're survival tools. Here's a story that drives this home. During the Texas freeze, my friend Sarah's gas line actually froze solid. Power was out, but she still needed to heat baby formula for her 6-month-old. Having a portable butane stove literally kept her baby fed when all conventional heating methods failed. That $30 stove was priceless in that situation. The key is having multiple ignition sources because Murphy's Law applies extra hard during emergencies. Waterproof matches, disposable lighters, magnesium fire starters, and even a magnifying glass for solar ignition if you have sunny weather. Item number 8. Sanitation supplies nobody talks about. Let's talk about item 8, something nobody wants to discuss, but everyone needs to understand. Comprehensive sanitation supplies. What happens when toilets stop flushing and showers stop working? FEMA learned from Hurricane Katrina and Sandy that sanitation failures kill people just as quickly as food and water shortages. We're talking about moist towelettes, hand sanitizer, feminine hygiene products, diapers if you have small children, and here's the big one that most people never consider: waste disposal supplies. Heavy-duty garbage bags, plastic ties, and portable toilet supplies. The brutal reality is that when sewage systems fail, disease spreads fast. Cholera, dysentery, hepatitis. These aren't third world problems. They show up anywhere sanitation systems break down, and they can kill healthy adults in days. But here's something most people don't think about: psychological hygiene. Being able to clean yourself, brush your teeth, and maintain basic personal care isn't just about preventing disease. It's about maintaining dignity and mental wellness when everything else is chaos. I remember reading interviews with families during extended pandemic lockdowns who said that simple things like having baby wipes for cleaning faces and hands made them feel human again when everything else felt hopeless. Mental health during disasters is just as critical as physical health.
Item number 9, cash and the reality of collapsed systems. Item 9 is something that could save your family when everything else fails: physical cash and small bills. Here's what most Americans don't understand about how quickly our digital economy can collapse. When power grids fail, credit cards don't work, ATMs don't work, digital payments don't work. You're back to a cash-only economy instantly, and most people have zero cash on hand. During Hurricane Sandy, I interviewed a guy named Mike who had plenty of money in his bank accounts but couldn't access any of it. Power was out for weeks, banks were closed, and ATMs were dead. He watched neighbors trade cash for gasoline, food, and basic supplies while he had nothing to offer, despite being financially well off. FEMA now recommends keeping at least $500 in cash, but here's the critical detail: small bills. We're talking 1s, 5s, 10s, and 20s. When someone's selling batteries for $10 during an emergency, you don't want to hand them a $100 bill and hope for change. But here's where cash becomes real leverage. It's not just for buying things, it's for getting help. Need someone to clear a fallen tree from your driveway? Cash talks when credit cards don't work. Need a neighbor to share their generator power? Cash provides immediate incentive when normal economic systems have failed. Store cash in multiple waterproof containers in different locations throughout your house. And here's an uncomfortable truth. Don't tell people about it. During desperate times, even good neighbors can make poor decisions if they know you have resources they desperately need. Item number 10, documents that prove you exist. The 10th critical item is copies of all your important documents in waterproof storage. This doesn't sound exciting until you need it. Then it becomes absolutely crucial. Insurance policies, identification documents, bank account information, medical records, and family contact lists. When disaster strikes, you might need to prove who you are, file insurance claims, or access financial accounts. But your original documents might be destroyed or inaccessible. I have a friend who lost everything in a house fire 2 years ago. Everything. But because she had copies of her insurance policies, ID, and financial information in a fireproof safe, she could start the recovery process immediately. Her neighbors were waiting weeks just to prove they existed to insurance companies. The smart approach is digital copies on a waterproof USB drive, plus physical copies in a fireproof document safe. Include backup contact information for family members who live outside your immediate area, because local communication might be down while long-distance communication still works.
Item number 11, climate control that keeps you alive. Here's item 11, and this is something 94% of Americans completely overlook: emergency heating and cooling capability. Extreme temperatures kill more people during disasters than almost any other factor, but it's preventable with the right preparation. For heating, you need safe indoor heating sources, kerosene heaters with proper ventilation, sleeping bags rated for cold temperatures, and thermal blankets. But here's the critical safety factor: carbon monoxide detectors with battery backup. Improper indoor heating kills families every year during power outages. For cooling, battery-powered fans, cooling towels, and electrolyte replacement supplies. Heat stroke is a real killer, especially for elderly family members or anyone with health conditions. During the 2021 heat dome in the Pacific Northwest, hundreds of people died from heat-related causes, many because they had no way to cool down when air conditioning failed. The key is redundancy and safety. Have multiple heating sources, multiple cooling methods, and always prioritize safety over comfort. A portable heater that produces carbon monoxide will kill you just as dead as freezing temperatures. Item number 13, tools that make you self-reliant. The 12th item is a quality multi-tool and basic hardware supplies. When disaster strikes, you become your own maintenance crew, repair service, and construction team. Having the right tools can literally save your life. We're talking about a good multi-tool with pliers, screwdrivers, and a sharp knife, plus basic hardware, screws, nails, wire, zip ties, and a small hammer. These aren't just for repairs, they're for emergency modifications to your living space. Need to board up a broken window, secure a tarp over roof damage, create a makeshift shelter? Having basic tools and hardware makes the difference between successfully adapting to damage and being helpless while your situation gets worse. Organization is key here. Keep everything in a clearly labeled toolbox that's easy to grab during an emergency. Because when you're stressed and dealing with damage, you don't want to waste precious time hunting for the right tool. Item number 13. Power when the grid fails. Item 13 is portable power generation, and this has become critical as our dependence on electronic devices has increased. Your phone isn't just entertainment during an emergency. It's GPS navigation, emergency communication, flashlight, and access to critical information. Solar power banks, hand-crank generators, and portable battery stations can keep your essential devices running when grid power fails. But here's the key. Focus on essential devices only. Don't try to power your whole house. Prioritize communication devices, lighting, and medical equipment. I learned this lesson during an ice storm that knocked out power for 10 days. Having a way to charge phones and power LED lights meant we could stay informed,
communicate with family, and maintain some normalcy while neighbors were completely cut off from the outside world.
Item number 14, personal protection and security. The 14th item is something FEMA doesn't advertise heavily, but includes in their guidelines: personal protection and security measures. During disasters, normal law enforcement response is delayed or unavailable, and some people make desperate decisions. This includes door and window reinforcement supplies, motion sensor lights with battery backup, and noise-making devices like air horns or whistles. The goal isn't to become a fortress, it's to make your home less attractive to opportunistic criminals who know emergency services are overwhelmed. But personal protection goes beyond just security from other people. It includes work gloves for handling debris, safety goggles for working in dusty or smoky conditions, and sturdy boots for walking through damaged areas safely. Item number 15, psychological resilience supplies. The final item on FEMA's critical list is something most people never consider, but can make the difference between psychological breakdown and maintaining hope: comfort and morale supplies. This includes games or activities for children, books or entertainment for adults, comfort foods that provide psychological relief, and items that maintain normalcy, like coffee, tea, or favorite snacks. I know this sounds trivial compared to water and medical supplies, but I've interviewed dozens of disaster survivors, and they consistently say the same thing. Maintaining mental health and family morale was just as critical as meeting basic physical needs. Children especially need psychological anchors during traumatic situations. Having familiar games, toys, or activities can mean the difference between a child who can cope with the situation and one who becomes traumatized by it. Here's the bottom line that FEMA can't say directly but wants every American to understand. Disasters are getting more frequent, more severe, and more widespread. Climate change is creating unprecedented weather events. Our infrastructure is aging and vulnerable. Supply chains are more fragile than ever, and emergency response capabilities are stretched thinner each year. You don't need to buy everything at once. Start with the most critical items: water, food, communication, and build gradually. But start now, because the best time to prepare was last year, and the second best time is today. If you found this information valuable and want to take your disaster preparedness to the next level, remember to check out that comprehensive guide I mentioned earlier. You can find the link in the description. It's the ultimate disaster preparedness guide that goes way deeper than just supply lists. It includes step-by-step organization strategies, family communication plans, and the psychological preparation that can make the difference between thriving during a disaster and barely surviving. The goal isn't to become a paranoid prepper living in fear. The goal is to become the neighbor who has what they need when crisis hits, so you can help others instead of needing help yourself. Your future self will thank you for taking action today, and your family will thank you if that action ever becomes the reason they stay safe during the unthinkable. If this video opened your eyes to how unprepared most Americans really are, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. I'm constantly researching disaster preparedness trends, supply chain vulnerabilities, and emergency response updates so you don't have to. Drop a comment below telling me which of these 15 items you're prioritizing first. I read every single comment, and it helps other viewers see what people are focusing on. Remember, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Your family's safety might depend on the decisions you make today.